Welcome to the latest episode of the Build Your People podcast with Kathy Humm. I'm your co-host, Jenn Dewees, and I'm also president of the Maryland Center for Construction Education Innovation, MCCEI. At MCCEI, our mission is to inspire, educate, and connect a diverse population to careers in the built environment. On today's episode, we will be talking about strategic workforce planning and preparing for the future. Our guests today are Tom Forman of Beckstrom Electric and Jenn Vedrani of Southway Builders.
Welcome to Build Your People. Today we're going to be talking about strategic workforce planning, preparing for the future. I'm Kathy Humm of NTP HR, and Jenn Dewees, who is the president of MCCEI, is with us, and the two of us will be asking questions of our wonderful guests. And I'd like to turn it over to Jenn. Why don't you share a little bit about yourself?
Thank you. My name's Jenn Vedrani. I run the HR department at Southway Builders. I actually love this topic because I got into human resources as a recruiter. And so it's near and dear to my heart. However, that was 20 some odd years ago. So things have changed just a little bit. But I think, today's session and what we're experiencing at Southway is really important as an HR and continuing evolution of businesses in general. So my skill set in recruiting has really played a part, and I think why I'm a valuable asset to my company today.
Awesome.
For sure. So Southway Builders is a general contractor in the DMV and the Carolinas. Thanks, Jenn. Tom, how about you? Why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, good morning, everybody. My name's Tom Forman. I am the operations manager as well as the apprenticeship administrator for Beckstrom Electric here in Loudoun County, Virginia. I've been doing this forever. I started in this trade in 1985, and I have worn many hats over those 40 plus years. So it's something that as an industry I fell in love with, and that's why it's so valuable to give back for what I've received of it. Glad to be here and talk about it.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Wonderful. So Kathy, we've spent a lot of time over the last couple of seasons talking about workforce and recruitment strategies and retention, and it does seem like a lot of companies are not strategic, right? They are hiring for immediate needs and not planning for the future. So I'm really excited to talk to these two whose companies do not seem to be doing that. And hopefully our listeners will get some best practices from this. So when we say the word strategic workforce planning, Jenn, Tom, what does that mean to you?
I'll let Jenn answer that question and I'll back it up.
Thanks. So for me, it's about taking a look. You just hit the nail right on the head. It's easy to get wrapped up in the day-to-day and focus on what the needs are now, but to really think about how to grow your business and get ahead of what you're going to need in the future, I think really defines strategic workforce planning. So for us, it's moving away from the now, which we still have to concentrate on, but carving a set amount of time to look at what the needs will be in 12 to 24 months and beyond that. But I think it's also about how to make sure we're retaining key employees also and not having a lot of turnover, which would lead to even more difficulties with our planning. So it's a combination of both of those for me.
Yeah, I echo everything you just said. As far as planning for the future, and the way that we do that, and I'm sure that we'll get into this further, is our apprenticeship program. Recruiting these high school seniors who are getting ready to, hit the workforce and developing their skill set over the next 4 years to turn them into journeyman electricians first. That's where it starts. But yeah, definitely planning for the now. It's a balance that you have to deal with daily, unfortunately. But yeah, the apprenticeship has really really played a huge part in that strategic planning.
Before we came on air today, we were talking about the workforce shortages. And Jen, I think you mentioned that, 40+% of the baby boomers will be retiring in 2000.
Basically, the rest of the baby boomers.
2030, really, the rest of the baby boomers. And then there's the fertility rate for women was 3.5 in the 1960s. It's now 1.7. So people are having fewer children. So these things, coupled with other things, are making sort of a crisis for us, particularly in the construction space. When we think about that, what are your biggest challenges as it relates to the workforce and attracting talent to your companies?
You want to take this one first, Tom?
Yeah. Man, there's so many answers that can go along with that question. Probably the biggest one is the current age bracket that we're dealing with right now, and their work ethic isn't as profound as the Generation X's and the baby boomers. That's probably the biggest challenge that I face, or we face, with this, I'll say it, millennial generation, is their work ethic. They've been so tied up in the electronic world. And then once you get to the construction side of it, they don't know how to use their hands and mind together to accomplish what needs to be accomplished. The construction industry, yes, it has its electronic facets, but it's still hands-on. And that's probably one of our biggest challenges.
Well, there's good news for you, though, Tom, because Gen Z does want to work with their hands. And we're seeing they're actually being called the tool belt generation because they want work-based learning. Now, granted, they still, gear heavily towards, but they are recognizing for the first time in history, we have a lower enrollment in, like, college enrollment is lower.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt.
And so, yes, we know construction is not for everybody, right? We know that working outside in the weather and with tools, and it's hard. I mean, I would imagine too, an electrician having your arms in the air doing lighting all day long is a lot of work, right? So it's not for everybody. I wouldn't be able to do that kind of work. But I think one of the things that Gen Z is noticing, and that's what we've heard anyway, is that skills-based education gets you a job, like a career and a family-sustaining career, as opposed to just an education. Like, an education is obviously valuable, but I did what I went to college for. I'm not doing right now, right? And I think that's a lot of people that go to college, whereas that's what the construction industry is giving. And I think, yes, millennials do have a bad rap. They're not all.
They're not.
Yes, they're not. But thankfully, Gen Z seems to be swinging in the other direction. But we are still there. There aren't probably very many Gen Zs in the workforce yet, so we aren't seeing too much of that.
Yeah. Jen, how do you feel about your biggest workforce challenges from a general contractor's perspective?
My struggle is diversity in the team, really. So, I think that, first of all, Jen, I think that's a great point you made. I have 2 Gen Zers, and the interest in technical school, and I was actually going to bring this up later on, but that's been a real option for them, a totally different perspective. And my son is already thinking about what they can do with the truck and his buddies, and what kinds of things they can do now. So I have found that to be a sort of a light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak. But for me, again, it's making sure that I have a workforce that's reflective of our communities and that is drawn from different backgrounds. And I think that adds to success for the company and continued growth for what we want to achieve in our vision. So that's been a real issue for us. And then also just making sure that we have the right tools for everyone to learn and develop, because that's a huge part of my sort of toolkit is if we don't have the skill set, what do we need to do to develop it? And how do we get that to multiple people at the same time without taking them away from their jobs? Because obviously in the construction industry, they can't duck out for a half day to go to a training session. So how do I bring that learning to them and conduct micro learning sessions or different things that can reach a broader spectrum of people in the field?
Very cool. So I guess I'm wondering, like, we talked a little bit about one skills gap, which is the lack of a desire to work with your hands, right? Or maybe not the lack of desire, they don't have the prior experience to working with their hands. So there's a little harder than maybe previous generations might have been helping their dad around the house or whatever. And maybe millennials dads were outsourcing that work or something like that. I don't know. You're right. I am a Zennial, and I was told that if I didn't go to college and everyone was going to be working with computers, like literally I remember being told math, science, computers, that's all you need to be successful. So we forgot about that for a lever. So that's like one skills gap. Are there any other skills gaps or anything like that for the labor shortage that you think are going to continue to evolve for your companies? Like where are those gaps you're seeing when you're hiring people?
The way that I, when I, go to a high school and I talk to a group of seniors, I don't sugarcoat anything because they need to know what they're about to embark on if they choose. I tell them, look, this is construction. This is physical labor. You mentioned working out in the elements. You'll end up for the first week to a month, you'll use muscles you didn't even know you had. It's physical labor, but it's temporary when in relation to the big picture, because this is not a job. This is absolutely, without a doubt, not a job. Jobs are temporary until you find that career path. This is a career. This is what you invest in your retirement, 25, 30 years down the road. But as far as what that one thing is, it's that attention to the work ethic. This is a full-time position. Some they think it's only part-time because they decide they don't want to go to work. They don't go to work. It's that challenge, and that all attributes to their work ethic.
Tom, I appreciate the way that you share that with potential candidates to come and work at Beckstrom. I know as an HR leader, I would always say this is not a 9-to-5 job. You're outside. You have to get up early. You have to show up. The trade partner subs show up at 7. You're late if you're there at 7. So you need to show up, get your coffee, go to the bathroom, and get ready to rock and roll. And so it's an early start. Some days are longer because you're working off a budget and a schedule, and you may have to put in some extra hours. And so making that known up front.
Yeah, I always tell them, if you're on time, you're late.
Mm-hmm.
If you're on time, you're late.
So it's interesting for me because I came from, I didn't mention this before, but I actually came from a construction tech business into the construction arena. So I have a little different take, which is just adoption of technology is a skill gap. I would say we're trying to adopt technology, and then some of the people who have been with us longer struggle with that. Whereas I think it's an attractive thing for people that are up and coming into the industry to be a tech savvy business. So we're also at that kind of crossroads too, where how do you adopt technology correctly, where you have a variety of skills and comfort level with it.
Yeah, I would say that one of our future podcast topics is on technology. And I would say there's a gap with HR, strategic HR, and technology in the construction, industry across the board. So spot on, Jen. I 100% agree with that.
Wonderful. So, we've talked about a few things like we've kind of talked about work ethic. We talked a little about skills gap, like how, so as HR professionals and hiring managers and whatever, like how can you work together to align strategies for those long-term outcomes? Like, how do you say, all right, we have this technology that we want to employ, but like none of our current employees have that. How do we hire for somebody that has that? Or all of my, foremen, looking at them, are due to retire in the next 6 years. How do I get somebody to that level in 6 years? Like, how does HR and like how are you guys doing that with your businesses?
Workforce planning. Yeah.
Can I respond to that? Because I think I have the perfect answer. And again, it's going to sound repetitious, but it's through our apprenticeship program because we've already implemented it. We started, and I'm kind of probably skipping ahead on some things. We started our apprenticeship program in 2016 because we identified exactly what we're talking about. So, as an apprentice, so they graduate right out of high school. They come into the workforce. They say they want to get into the electrical trade. They start the school year in September. Around the tail end of their second year to the beginning of their third year, you start to see the cream rise to the top. And we hone in on that. We identify that. And we tell them in the beginning that, look, yes, you are here. Your first priority is for us to turn you into journeyman electrician, give you the 4 years of school that's required with that, and administer the journeyman's test once you're done. At the same time, we also are grooming you to become the next leadership of this company, which means, the next foreman or project managers or however, but, journeyman to foreman is really what we want to hone in on. So we currently have 5 to 6, maybe 7 right now that have went through our apprenticeship program and are foreman running work right now. So that's how we identify and adapt and overcome that situation, as we do it from within. Now, we have done it and it's blown up in our face where we identified a couple individuals and we put them out on, we kind of put them out on an island all by themselves, and we're kind of, we take some of the blame in that, and they failed. And, we won't do that again. That was a valuable lesson learned. But yeah, we do it from within the apprenticeship because it's, all the good foremen right now, they're working. They're not beating down our front door looking for a job. They're already working. So that's why
You have to build your own. You have to build your own.
We're doing it. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, I just want to say, Tom, that is music to my ears. And I saw a graph that said if you hire someone today as an apprentice, they before 2030, they are your seasoned worker, right? Mm-hmm. That's 5 years from now. They are run and work. They are self-sufficient because you trained them, and you're not. And the best part is that you pay them according to how much they know, right? Yeah. You're not pulling somebody, like you said, those foremen. How are you going to pull them from someone that they're working? Right. You're going to pay them a lot of money if they're already working.
I mean, it can be done, but it's going to cost a lot of money, and quite frankly, the way that it is done, it's a little on the sleazy side. It's I call it poaching. It is what it is. But talking about the journey, from an apprenticeship to a foreman, that's my journey. That's exactly how I did it. I went through an apprenticeship eons ago, and I went from an apprentice to a journeyman. I became a master electrician, a service manager, project manager, now operations manager, as well as an owner. So, and I tell that story because anybody can do it. Anybody can do it.
Mhm.
You know, with the right attitude, the work ethic, the initiative and motivation, the willingness to learn,
Mhm.
and the willingness to want to succeed. You know, so sorry, I'm probably jumping all over the
No,
place,
that's
but
fine.
That's all right.
That's
That's
great.
wonderful.
Love it.
Jen,
Jen,
what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so very similar. So kind of going back to how we evaluate it. So there's a lot of communication with myself and the operational leaders to make sure we're taking a look at where we're at any given day and sort of trying to get ahead of the curve. And as we talked about just, a little bit earlier in the day, we have a leadership development program for succession planning that's closer in time and a need for us. And then we have an intern program and a recent graduate hiring strategy that allows our interns to go through a rotational program. And they learn about the 3 different major areas of our business over a 12-week period. And then if they want to, and then we invite the ones, again, as Tom had referenced, the cream of the crop rises, and we invite them back the following year so that they can focus on one particular area. Right now for us, that's very specifically superintendents who we've identified are harder and harder to find out in the field. So that's a track we've really focused on. And then after they come back, they can work in that specific track. And we expect that by the time they graduate, we'll have an offer. They'll already have received an offer from us, and that they'll come on board with us right when they graduate, and they'll have had that several years of training under their belt so that they can be productive in a much quicker time than someone straight out, a new hire straight from graduation.
Jen, can I ask you about the superintendent position? So I spent my career in construction management. Every construction manager I've ever worked for, 90% of the superintendents were previous tradespeople. And with the trades shortage, I would imagine that's why you're having a drying up on your superintendent shortage. So what kind of strategies are you guys using? Are you looking outside the trades? Like, how are you bringing superintendents on?
And it goes back to what I just said a little bit, that and also some of what Tom said. So we have a recruiting team that's great at passive recruiting. And so we have a pipeline of people that we've built out over the past 12 months, because I've only been there for a short period of time, of people who, if they do decide to make a change, they know to call us and work with us. And then we couple that with the program dedicated to training and develop growing our own. But that still left us with a gap. We're still trying to figure some of that out, because that's a 2-pronged approach, but I feel like there's something in the middle that we need. And you bring up a good point of, how do I get even further into trade schools? I live in Anne Arundel County, so they've got a great technical school, and that's sort of my next step, is how can I dig deeper into that pool and see, because I think it's a mindset, and it's kind of traits that you're looking for. I think we have to move away from the fact that you have to have XY skill in order to be successful. We can teach you those things. Mm-hmm. So what's teachable, and what do you have to have innately? And so looking at those different options is where we're headed.
Yeah. So when I go, I'm the same way. I hit a lot of the high schools here in Northern Virginia. Some of them have, in-house electrical programs. So obviously those are the ones that I hone in on. So when I go and talk to them, I don't talk about, well, you need to know, Ohm's law or anything like that. I say, here's what you have to come to the table with. Forget about the electrical trade itself. This is what you have to come to me with. I said it earlier, positive attitude, a solid work ethic, initiative and motivation, and the willingness to want to learn, and then taking that and then wanting to succeed. We will teach and train everything you need to know about the electrical industry, the pipe, the wire, the formulas, all that. You have to have those 5 things, or 3 of the 5, and we can work with the rest, hopefully. But you got to come to the table with that.
So it's the essential skills. You have to have the core essential skills in construction, and we'll teach you the rest, whether it's superintendent, project management, the trades route. We'll teach you the rest. So you just have to have those those
Yeah.
essential skills. Now, I'm thinking about upskilling and reskilling. And Jen, I know you and I have talked about the entry level piece is important to build your own. Beckstrom's doing that with their apprenticeship program. What about those that you have in your workforce, maybe middle managers? What are some things that you are doing to elevate them to a higher level of management or even succession planning for the organization?
So we embarked and this is actually my second go around with a program like this, but we embarked in a leadership development process and program that encompasses things that we know are critical to the success of our organization. Be that it's primarily, it's a lot around emotional intelligence and understanding your workforce. And so we're creating it's a 24 month program. It'll be 2 sessions, probably 9 months each session, to cover different areas of different programs and different kind of training sessions that we think are critical to being a successful leader at the organization. It's also a combination of reading materials, podcasts, just keeping people current on evolving trends in leadership. But the idea is that we want to do this now before we're at a crisis where we have vacancies or people that are retiring and we don't have a backfill for it. So we really said we need to get ahead of this and kind of brainstorm the different types of information that we wanted to feed, and then a keystone project that they can work on that will solve a real business challenge. So that's the outcome for them, as they get to be involved in solving a real business challenge. I might add, we did this with the intern program as well in a much different way, where they had to provide information on how to better recruit recent grads and what platforms we should be on. And so they worked with me very selfishly to identify how we could solve some recruiting challenges, this very topic, workforce planning. And so maybe we'll have to talk about that, Kathy, and have the team work on some workforce planning strategies as well. But it's all of us coming together and identifying we've got to get ahead of this now. And bringing in the best of the best to help us get there. So Kathy's a big part of that, actually.
It's amazing, these younger people, when you give them a business challenge, it's remarkable when they present. Number one, their technology skills are off the charts and they present these elaborate presentations, but their thought process, it's just really fun to see the younger generation do that. Tom, what about you? You've built the apprenticeship program. What about beyond Forman and middle management and succession planning and those kinds of things?
That's a whole separate challenge. And here again, all the good people are already working. We run the ads on Indeed and ZipRecruiter and all that. And that's what I was going to, add was all the listings that you see on any one of those platforms of attractive people that, hey, this would be a good fit. And you set up the interviews and the chats and I call them meet and greets before, you really want to get to know somebody before you, create an offer or a formal interview. And we just had this past Friday. I was set to interview an electrician, hiring a skilled, seasoned electrician. No show, no call. So we actually just were we were successful in hiring an experienced project manager for the construction department here. He's due to start first week of April, and we got him. He's actually relocating back to Carroll County from Florida. We're super excited to bring him on board, because here's the other thing with Beckstrom Electric. Our ideology is it's all about fit and the right person, because, we consider us, we really kind of consider us family. We spend so much time together, and that particular person, and this kind of is kind of goes against what we're talking about, but they have to be a fit. They really truly have to be a fit for us. Personalities are just they're difficult. We all know that. But here again, the amount of interviews we set up and the people just flat out don't show up. It's amazing. Why did you apply? It's almost like they were hacked or something. I don't know what it is. But as far as the recruiting, going out and recruiting middle management, that's a whole separate challenge, because there really is no place to go and do that we have found. We've actually been successful with our tenure of our project managers that are here. There's a lot of years in this building, a lot of years.
So take care of your people. So that's the retention piece.
Yeah, exactly.
And those foremen become, higher level project managers.
We've actually got one across the hall right now who went through the apprenticeship, became a foreman, was successful at that. Now he's across the hallway as a project manager, because we identified his skill set. And that's its own success story.
That's a good point that you bring up, is making sure that you have a plan for those people who you identify for the long term, and making sure they know and are included in that plan. I've seen too often times where there's a plan at the top for people, but the person doesn't actually know that you're planning to give them these different opportunities to develop. And then they're out the door because they don't recognize you're so invested in them.
Yeah. And
then you've got to rehire, and you're not going to get that caliber of person potentially. Yeah. So I think that clear communication for your teams of what their tracks are and how they can progress through the organization is another big part of retaining and building out the skill sets internally.
That's so smart, Jen, because that has happened to me personally. Like, I remember giving my notice and them saying, well, you were 6 months away from a promotion. Well, no one's ever told me that. And the reason I'm like, by the time I gave my notice, like, I was already out the door, right? By the time somebody starts looking, they're out the door because they think they're not valued, right? And you have to have those conversations more than once a year with your team. I try with my team. We're a small team, so I'm lucky, but we try to do them often. So, like, people know this is what I'm seeing for you. And what do you want out of your career too? Not just what does the company need from you, but what do you want?
We just check up our whole performance management process this year in that same vein of saying, we don't need, the old performance management process is sort of dead, if you will. It's not working. It's just a check-in. We want to make it so that it's about your goals and your development. And we tied that to incentive compensation as well. You identify what you want to work on, and we're going to talk to you about the department needs. And when you make these, milestones, then there's opportunity to earn incentive compensation. It's tied in with the company goals. So we've really synced up. And then it's, for every single person, they have that. So because we had a loss, that was a big one, and we don't want it to happen. I'm sure that's how your team felt, Jen, after you left. But you're right in saying when somebody's looking, they're out the door. There's no coming back from that situation in most cases. So avoiding it is really the best bet.
Yeah, that's actually kind of one of the things. And Kathy, you're kind of instrumental into what we got going on right now. Beckstrom has been around 40 couple years, through 4 generations of ownership changes. Up until the last 2 to 3 years, we kind of operated on the same platform as we did back in 1989, I want to say, when the company was started. When we know we can't do that anymore. So we're revamping everything, just for that. And that was actually one of the things that we preached as a company. Quality of life it matters to us and our employees. The quality of life that we provide to our employees, that matters. And we told them that. But now we have to show them in, several different ways now. So that's kind of what we're in the middle of. We're kind of orchestrated chaos right now with regards to that.
I think it's important that you are continuing to both of your companies evaluate and reevaluate and realize that you can't things can get stale, even though they've worked for you up until this point. All right. Something maybe isn't working. Yeah. So we have to shift. It's smart.
Bottom line is without our employees, ours and Jenn's, we don't exist. Mm-hmm. We don't exist. So
when I worked at Harkins, I had a interesting conversation, possibly debate with one of the leadership team members, and he would always say, "We build buildings." I said, "No, you don't. You build people." "We don't build people. We build buildings." I'm like, "No, we build people because they're the ones that build your buildings for you."
Yeah, buildings are secondary.
Yeah,
you have to build people.
That's actually our mission at Southway, and our purpose is all built around, we're a servant leadership organization. So it's all about making sure that we help maximize people's potential and help them attain their potential. But it's different when you operate with that mentality. And I think to this conversation we're having today, it also can help mitigate some of the risks that you have for workforce planning if you do have these types of programs in place. Because you're showing that commitment. And to Tom's point, you are with these people all the time. So why not invest in them? Yes, some people are going to leave, and maybe you've given them all the training in the world, but you've made them a great person to go out, and they've got everything that they needed from you. So it's when I get pushback sometimes on investment in training and development because of the possibility that someone's going to turn around and leave, then I say that's okay.
You would be surprised how many of those people they realize that the grass is not always greener. They end up coming back. That happens a lot.
Or they have positive things to say about your organization. And let's just face it, that's another reality of today's workforce is there are websites that you can go look at all these types of things on how you're treated, what the benefits are like. Glassdoor kind of created a social media platform for what your company was like. So I'd rather have someone leave us and say that they had a great experience and we gave them all the tools and resources, but they wanted, they were looking for just a different opportunity or a larger company or global, opportunity than I would that they said we didn't provide them with the tools or the training that they needed to be successful.
Because studies show the more you invest in your people, the more loyal they are.
Correct.
Sure. I mean, it is, I've heard many times the same thing, like, well, I'm not going to train them because they're just going to leave. Right. And it's silly. So what are you going to do? Pay for somebody else, to have been trained somewhere else? So pay for someone else's training that you have to undo.
Well, that's the definition of insanity. It's expecting a different result. Mm-hmm. The same result or however it is, but that's a no-win situation.
So when we think about workforce planning, there are so many moving parts with construction, with the budget, the schedule, and project slipping. And Jenn, you mentioned earlier, there's the here and now. You have to focus on positions you need to fill now. But what is your strategy, your secret sauce on how you plan for future needs? What have you created? What technology do you use? Any and all of the above. I'm just curious how you are more proactive with workforce planning.
We're very lucky right now that I have a great recruiter on staff and a company that's heavily, we have we use Paylocity. And so we have the recruiting module of Paylocity, which allows us to track all of our applicants, both that come from internal applications, which we've talked about a little bit, doesn't always necessarily bring the best results. But we put all of our referrals and anyone who comes in through a firm or whatnot, we make sure we have a database of people and we talk to all of them. So we are literally 24/7, we're recruiting. Leah is on full time. And we're in this situation right now. We hired 26 people over the past 10 months. And during one of our resource planning sessions, they said, we need to bring on 16 more by July 1st. And so we went back and we looked at folks who didn't fit for whatever reason at the time or weren't ready to move when we first met with them. And we started dialing for dollars and checking in with all of them because we had this relationship with them.
And how did they know you needed 16? What are they? Is there a staffing meeting? How do you? Was there a system?
Yeah, we have a bi-weekly staffing call or resource planning meeting, and it's the department heads and myself, where we evaluate where our projects stand at any given moment in time and what the expected start date is. And then we plan out who needs to be on the site first. So, of course, it's the superintendents and PMs. And then we strategize. So then we strategize what that leaves us for vacancies and then what positions we can hire on shortly after. So it's all structured out. We use Team Builder, which is new for us to do that planning. Although we've used Smart Sheets and a variety of other systems
and pencil.
Right, exactly, to navigate. But what we recognize is that we basically, for our growth, we need 16 teams, and we have 14 right now. Or excuse me, we have 12 right now. Scratch that. My first spot's right there. So we got up to 12 teams. And then said, okay, what does next year look like? And we recognize we need to get up to 16 teams within the next 12 months, and including a big push at the beginning of July. So again, we went back to that pipeline that we had created and all the relationships we had established. And we recognized that we had about 13 people right there that were ready to go, that had been through some type of interview process and had the green light to continue. And went back and we called them, and it's been amazing because we could show it directly to the leadership team. This is what we've been working on, and this is what we've been doing. So don't say that you don't need a full-time recruiter. We do.
So, Jenn, you said you've only been with Southway for a short period of time. You've obviously been in a major hiring frenzy, right? 26 people, 16 more. And you talked about there's clearly been a shift in the thinking of how you're hiring and the processes. So can you kind of give us how you did it before versus how you guys plan on doing it now? So that anybody listening is all right, well, I'm not thinking long-term. What should I be changing?
Absolutely. So there's three main areas. So the first thing was we weren't hiring interns directly after graduation. We didn't have a plan to bring them on after they finished their last rotation. So we changed that right away and brought on our first 2 full-time hires as a result of graduating from the intern program. Additionally, we weren't using the recruiting module, so we would lose track of who we had contacted. And we didn't have that pipeline or rating of whether or not they were a positive candidate or not. So we implemented that system. And then we were working with multiple firms. It was all over the place. And we were buried with different companies trying to join us or come do something with us. And we said, forget it. We're going to evaluate who we want to work with and who presents the best candidates. So we narrowed it down to 2. And so they keep a stream of people coming to us at all points in time.
And also hired a recruiter. And that's new. That, you show the ROI for the recruiter versus fewer recruiting firms at a 20, 25, 30% of base salary cost. You can show the rate of, investment on, for Leah, your recruiter.
It's awesome.
Tom, for people that may not be in a position to build an apprenticeship program within their organization, talk to us a little bit about what you did before that and what was your strategy and maybe what led up to that and
Well,
how simple this process.
you know, we're a member of the Northern Virginia ABC, and they offer, they have their own apprenticeship program. And what prompted us to start our own was, one, coming from my days in the union. I spent 25 years in Local 26. And when I came out of my apprenticeship, I was tabbed to be an instructor. And I'm thinking to myself, why do I want to be an instructor? I just spent 5 years of an apprenticeship to be an electrician. And the apprenticeship director at the time, he says, "Nah, you can teach. You just don't know it yet." So I said, okay. I gave it a shot. Scared to death. Here I'm going to have a classroom, 25, 30 students in front of me, and they expect me to have the answers. And that's what scared me the most. And once I, talked myself off the ledge of that, I fell in love with teaching. And I taught for several years at the apprenticeship level. I also taught at Montgomery College in Rockville. I taught journeyman code. And when I got to Beckstrom, all of our apprentices at the time, and we didn't have that many, again, going through ABC, they actually would come to us. We're not learning anything because they didn't spend enough time in the classroom. They'd show up to class, the instructor would say, there for an hour and then gone, didn't learn anything. So we just finally threw in the towel, and the one of the gentlemen here has come to me and says, "What do you think?" I said, "Sign me up." And we hit the high schools. I mean, it wasn't easy with all the applications that had to be submitted. You have to find and develop a curriculum, get approved to be an accredited training facility within the state of Virginia. It was not easy, but once you got all that in place, now it's just a matter of getting people in the seats to teach, and it has snowballed from there. There have been actual schools that have modeled their in-house programs after hours. So it is. I am so proud of what we have in place now, and as long as I can do it, I'll do it. And I do need. It's not a one-person job. I will say that it is a lot of work. I'm in the middle of career fair season right now, so
it is. So MCCI, we are part of the Maryland Apprenticeship Connector, and we are here to help organizations. So if any of our folks listening are interested in learning more about how to start an apprenticeship, you can apprentice almost any career these days. There are apprenticeships in IT and nursing and cosmetology, and you name it. There are even construction management apprenticeships already in the state of Maryland as well. So Jenn, we definitely need to chat because what we think a huge gap is that superintendents can be filled with apprenticeships. Sure. But if anybody's looking, we will put contact information in the show notes so you can reach out to us and we can help you, because not everyone has the resources and has a Tom that can help build a curriculum. There are plenty of existing programs out there. There are, like you mentioned, ABCs. All chapters are not equal. I'll just say that, I would imagine, on ABC. But there are some really great ones here in Maryland. We have the Independent Electrical Contractors Association. We have all the unions, if you're a union organization. And then every community college has apprenticeship programs too, that they love to help work with individual employers to help meet their needs. And then you can also build your own curriculum. So there's lots of ways to skin that apprenticeship cat. But any way you do it is helping you build a workforce that works for you. That's a beautiful part about apprenticeships, is that it's how you want to train your folks. So off the apprenticeship topic for a minute, Like, how do you, what we've talked a little bit about the technologies, Jen, that you guys are using that is helping you without Tom, are you guys using any technologies to bring in to manage your apprentices, or working with Kathy to implement some maybe?
It's, the technology, at the apprenticeship level, obviously, when I was actually the first instructor here at Beckstrom, everything was paper and books. We've gone away from, we still do some books, but the vast majority of the curriculum is web-based. So we've got the tablets now that every student has. From a management standpoint, every project manager, has at their disposal, all the software that they need to do their job. From the iPhones and apps, and we just flipped to Microsoft 365. I'm still struggling with that. So within the next year, we are flipping everything to the cloud. I'm scared to death. I'm scared to death when that happens, just
It's
because.
all good, Tom. Take a breath.
I don't trust what you say, Kathy, but I'm still scared to death when that happens. So, when I say technology, that's the type of stuff that we have going on. And there's things.
Well, we are. We're going to be implementing Paycom, which has a recruiting and onboarding component to it, which, to Jen's point with Paylocity, any of your candidates that apply, even for the apprenticeship, whether it's a referral through your website, through one of these job boards, they will be imported into the system where you can keep track of that pool.
I am excited about that.
That's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
And I wanted to just jump back quickly, because there's something I think is a really good point, and something to share with our audience. I know, Jen, your company's doing this, and I know at my previous employer, we did it where you set aside a chunk of money for bench candidates. So because it's so fluid in the construction space, where you don't know if you need to hire them now or if that job pushes, you can hire that top candidate, and you have a pool of money, which is called bench money, 200,000, 300,000, 400,000, whatever, where you can hire that person, charge it to the bench, and they can work until you can plug and play, so to speak. So I think that's a really good strategy, so that you don't lose a good candidate because you just don't have that position available at that moment.
Sadly, my bench got eaten up. Not sadly, it's a mixed blessing, right? When more projects happen, all of a sudden we got to the bench spot, and then they were deployed immediately. It's a problem I'll take any day.
Refill them.
Correct.
That's amazing.
I also, if there's a second, I haven't talked about, we also have a strong referral program, which I think has been very beneficial to us. One of the things, and Tom, you had alluded to this before, there's a certain personality, there is a fit, there's a cultural fit, there's some, we call it hungry, humble, and smart. There's some qualities we want in people, and the best people who recognize that and can speak to our culture are our existing employees. So we do have a very significant referral bonus, which has gone a long way in our hiring this past year. By the numbers, we worked with a firm for 13 of our hires, and then hired 13 individually, which 5 of those 13 were from referrals. So, trying the different actions and seeing which one has the best impact is something I'm grateful we had this past 12 months to do. Now we can build on those programs and kind of manage them a little bit more closely, knowing what the big wins were out of each of them.
Jen, I think every construction company I've ever worked for has read The Ideal Team Player. When you said hungry, humble, smart, I was like, oh my God. I think everyone.
Just write that down.
Yeah. Ideal Team Player is the book, Tom.
Yeah, I like that.
No, but it's essential. Construction is a team sport, right? Yeah. And you need all kinds of personalities too, right? So I guess that's a question. Like, how do you balance, you don't want the same, you don't want a monolith of person, right? Like you want people with diverse talents and experiences and everything like that. How do you make sure that you're not continuing to hire the same person over and over again so that you don't have like a gap?
Or you don't have diversity of thought. Everybody thinks and acts the same way, so you're going to come up with the same solution without any, out of the box thinking.
We've done something pretty unique, which is that we have an interview team pool of people they have to follow the same process, but it's not just the hiring manager who's doing the interviewing and one other person. We have a pool of people that's about, I think there's currently 15 people in that pool, and we shake it up at the first level. So we follow a pretty rigid process. It's called the WHO process. And so there's a top grading interview where it can be any two people within the company. And so they have to bring forward the reasons why they think that person is a good fit. And it helps eliminate groupthink that I've seen in other hiring situations where they just pick carbon copies of themselves over and over again.
Very cool.
I think we kind of follow that same model. And I'm involved in the process from if we're interviewing for an electrician, because I can speak the technical language, I quiz them on, what their abilities are, if we're hiring for a project manager in the construction department, I'm part of that as well, because I can speak that language as well. So we kind of do the same thing. And then, upstairs in the service department, the same process. So yeah, we don't involve 15 different people, I don't think we're that big to be able to do that. So yeah, we do the same thing.
What advice would you give companies that are just starting to implement long-term workforce strategies? I know personally with my consulting business, I come across companies where they're like, we just need people, and they don't have time to think or act, and really focus on a strategy. They're just thinking in the moment. What kind of advice do you have to offer based on your experiences at each of your companies?
Persistence. Just be persistent. Don't give up on it. Don't give up on the process. It is a time-consuming process, especially to implement something. Just don't give up on it.
That's right. Mine's communication. So it's kind of this, we talk about what's working, what's not working. We make slight adjustments to it, and we spend time together. We carve out dedicated time to plan. I could reference the book 4DX. It's what our wildly important goal is, our human capital management and how we're going to have a solid workforce going into the future. So we make time, and I mentioned it's every 2 weeks for 90 minutes. Without a doubt, we get together and we talk about it. And then we stick to it, and we adjust as we need to. And that communication really keeps us from getting behind the 8 ball and scurrying to find people.
That's great.
So I think we could probably, this might be our longest episode we've ever had.
I love it. This great conversation.
Years, right? No, it's wonderful. Are there any words of advice that you one thing that we didn't talk about that you want to make sure people are thinking when they're thinking strategically for the workforce?
I think we just kind of summed that up in what I had just said and what Jenn just said. Okay. Definitely the communication piece of it. The more that you talk things through, you identify things that probably will add further communication. And again, when it comes to the recruiting and the implementing of workforce strategies, persistence, and don't give up on it. It's easy to throw in the towel, but yeah, you can't just like, I say that when I'm out recruiting students for the apprenticeship. They are so frustrating, but I will not give up on them. I can't give up on them.
That's your future workforce. You can't.
That's our future workforce. And trust me, some of them are worthy of giving up on, but I absolutely will not. I will not. So,
Awesome.
I'll never forget, I had an interview with a young guy. He came in with a Red Bull and his pants halfway down. And I was interviewing with a vice president who does quality control, and he's true blue, builder. And he said, son, as he's walking out, he said, next time, come prepared, dressed, and pull up those damn pants.
Yeah. But, I actually have that conversation because I'll go into the classroom and, and I won't do it in front of them. And because I'm not going to, belittle them that way.
Yeah.
But I have the conversation with the instructor and the career coaches that look, you need to prepare them to talk to people like me. I'm here to hire. I don't want to see them with their pants, halfway down. I have those conversations.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some of them get it. Some of them.
Probably no one has told them that.
Well, to be honest, think about the last 5 years. We've been working from home, and I am way more casual than I've ever been in my life, right? Because it is. I think the idea of dressing up for an interview seems like a foreign concept. Nobody dresses up for anything anymore. You go to the airport, and people used to, be in suits, and now they're wearing pajamas and slippers to get on the plane. So I think it's just a culture shift that maybe it's just that you need that one interview outfit. That was drilled into me when I was leaving college, was I need my interview outfit. But if they don't know that, right, and nobody's ever told them, then maybe what they wore isn't the most important thing if they've got a great attitude, right?
Well, and I talk about this too. I love that thread because having a 16 and 17-year-old and having the next generation, you're right, they're so casual. But I also train my leaders on the fact that you have multiple generations on your team now. And so what has worked for you in years past, communication-wise, technology-wise, whatever it may be, there is a bit of adjustment on everyone's end. It's not one way or the other. And if you continue to think that you can operate the same way over and over again, it's not going to work for you to attract next gen employees. You've got to adapt, even though there's some, essentials. If you're not going to make it to work, you need to call. A no call, no show is not acceptable. Okay.
And I had to train, and I'm old school, but I had to train my way of thinking and get past that. So
I always say, as an HR consultant, the old school, seasoned employee and the younger generation, you have to meet them in the middle. Like you said, Jen, we can't give in completely, but you've got to really come and meet them in the middle and come up with some sort of solution that works for everyone.
Unfortunately, you have to do that.
Yeah, you do. Otherwise, you won't have a workforce.
We wouldn't exist without that. So, there definitely is a meet in the middle.
Well, this has been awesome. I want to thank you guys for being so candid and sharing so much about your organizations and the growth that you're having. I think our listeners are going to gain a lot from this. And I wanted to thank our listeners for listening to the first episode of our third season of Build Your People. We hope you enjoyed it, and we hope that you come listen to our next one, where we continue to tackle the construction industry's biggest HR issues. If any of our listeners have a topic or question they'd like us to cover, please share them in the comments. Please check out all the links and resources in the show notes and follow us on social media. That's all for this episode. See you next time.